friends. Nice to see you all. I think you just hit message instead of admit. You probably want to admit instead of, yeah, there we go. I'm glad you are all in the comfort of your homes, hopefully able to cook unmasked. It's an interesting challenge. So I'm so used to, the dipping the spoon in and the tasting. Can you all hear me okay? Can I see thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Excellent. So welcome to Birthright Soups, episode 1 of 3. As you may or may not recall from Parashat Toldot, we have the two sons of Isaac, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob is favored by Rebekah, and Esau is favored by Isaac because Isaac loves his game, his hunting. And one day Esau comes in from a frustrating hunt where he presumably did not catch anything, and he is tired and he is famished. And he sees Jacob cooking and he says, "Give me some of that red stuff." And it says Jacob is cooking a lentil stew. So this was the impetus for the first series, and maybe there will be more, on cooking and eating the parasha. This idea of eating the foods inspired in Torah. We don't know in Torah what was in this lentil stew, but today I'm going to teach you my favorite lentil stew that I like to make, which is, I will be honest with the sources. It's inspired by a French onion style soup recipe in Molly Katzen's original Moosewood cookbook, which is delicious and a very delicate flavored soup. This lentilized version of it has that same delicious, rich, oniony flavor with a more earthy tone as well, and the protein of the lentils and the addition of mushrooms. So hopefully, if you are joining me today, you either just want to watch as a spectator. If you're hoping to make the soup, I hope you received the list of ingredients that we emailed out in advance, which primarily a lot of onions. The soup ingredients call for large onions, and I really get large onions, the biggest onions I can find in the onion box at Sundance. Lentils. There were some beautiful chanterelle mushrooms at Sundance, which I wouldn't usually splurge on, but because I'm teaching this class, I gave myself permission. And so we'll get right to cooking. If I were, I probably should have said onions chopped in the recipe, and given that I didn't, it meant I couldn't assume that we would come into this with our onions already chopped, so I will be chopping my onions as we go and giving time for any of you who are cooking alongside me to chop alongside me. So as I'm sure you all know, there are lots and lots of ways to chop onions, and for this soup, I just cut them in half like this and then cut thick half rings. I don't know, Jody, if you're zooming in on me. Too big to put on a bagel, but just right for this soup. And this onion's looks good, but a little wonky at the core. Somebody who knows more about agriculture than I do could probably explain why sometimes onions rot from the outside in. You have to peel away a layer of rot, and sometimes onions have this very dried out, desiccated core, but the outside is still okay. If you know, please unmute yourself and share. And so I apologize to my watchers for the tedium of watching me slice 4 very large onions. Fortunately, they're big slices. Jody, do me a favor and find me a large glass bowl.
A large glass bowl.
I didn't bring a cutting board that was super big for placing my cooked onions into. Okay. With me as the assistant, Jody Kurtner running the camera. I would check mixing bowls in that corner. There's serving bowls over there.
Ruhi,
Yes.
it's difficult for me to hear you when you're speaking down to your onions.
Okay, I will make sure to talk to
I don't know if anyone else is having that difficulty.
I will make sure to be more careful about talking to the camera. And you can also move the sound input of the computer closer to me, I think. Perfect. Thank you, Jody. Does that improve, Judy?
Yes, thank you.
All right, excellent. Shouldn't have changed the camera angle, right? Because the camera's still over there. Right. All right. Okay. It's a wonderful thing to be cooking in the TBI kitchen. Nobody has been cooking in this kitchen for a long time. And are you both, Jody and Nina, you're both going to do your demos from home, right?
I think we're going to do
you're
them
going to do
here.
them from here.
Yeah.
Okay. Lots of cooking
Same
in the
scenery.
TBI kitchen then. And I'm sure that some of the more experienced chefs watching would have commentary to offer on my knife skills or lack thereof. But oh well. These onions are a funny shape this week, sort of concave on the top. Oh boy, it is definitely good weather today for a hearty soup, isn't it? What a weekend it's been. And while I slice this last onion, can I ask folks to just briefly unmute yourselves and share your name and where you're watching from? We are recording this for posting later, so certainly don't share any more information than you want in the public domain, but I'd appreciate knowing whom I'm talking to.
David and Bernie.
Martha, I'm in Grants Pass at my daughter's house.
Lovely.
Judith, and I'm from Eugene.
David and Bernie are from Eugene too.
Nina, and I'm from Eugene.
I like your message, Miriam.
Yeah, the onions are getting to me.
She's crying for the onions. This is Judy. I'm in my kitchen in Eugene.
Wonderful. And it looks like Mina is making this soup along with me. Is anybody else making the soup along with me? Okay. That's fine.
Not today.
Not today, that's fine. But it does make me feel a little guilty. I thought I would just chop the onions after I started and give you all time to chop along with me. It makes me feel a little guilty for the tedium of you watching me chop onions. But, oh well.
Let it go.
Let's go. And then you can let me chop chanterelles. I mean, the thing about this soup is it's actually very easy and not fussy. It cooks down on its own. So if it weren't for all the chopping to be done, there'd really be very little to watch, to demo.
So you chop with your right hand, Rabbi.
Yes, I'm of an age where there were certain things I was just taught and conditioned to do right-handed. I also cannot use scissors with my left hand.
Because they're not made for left-handed people.
And I largely, yes, I largely
I
brushed.
do everything left-handed, everything.
So, somebody's trying to get in. I want to point out, these are some gnarly wild mushrooms that have like pine needles in them. And I am just going to let that be and throw some dirt in my soup. Because I think largely any of these little needles are pretty harmless. And I don't want to mess too much with these glorious mushrooms. And I tend to not chop chanterelles. I sort of think of them as something that have their own unique grain, although like obviously I'm not a chef, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I like to tear them like this when I'm going to cook them instead of trying to chop them into a particular shape.
Where did you get the mushrooms?
At Sundance, they just happened to have a lovely display of them yesterday, but as you know, we do have friends in this community who know places to go get mushrooms. So in years past, I have been lucky enough to be invited out foraging with like Marlene Drescher, and others, and not had to go to Sundance. And they freeze nicely too. I have, I think I still have a bag of sauteed chanterelles in my freezer from last fall, but
Can you freeze them raw?
no, okay, I sauteed them and froze them. But yes, but showing me defrosting a bag of mushrooms didn't also seem to be particularly nice for this cooking show. So fresh it is. I'm sorry, I'm throwing these on here. I should do that quite yet.
If you don't have chanterelles, what kind of mushrooms do you use?
I would use any good quality mushroom that imparts a distinct flavor. So if it weren't a particular wild mushroom season, I'd probably get shiitake mushrooms and use that. Yeah, a mushroom where the flavor of the mushroom will be more distinctive than the texture of the mushroom. So I definitely wouldn't use like a portobello.
Yeah, it's been 6 weeks and it's not in stock. So you can buy it from our website.
I'm sorry, where are we looking at?
The Chester-
You may already know this, but there's a left-hand store in San Francisco where you can buy left-hand scissors.
I did not know it,
Wow.
Yes,
but you know,
my daughter is left-handed, and when she started school, her teacher said the first thing we should do is buy left-hand scissors for her.
oh,
She, over the years, has learned to use right-hand ones, but I think it helped her starting out.
you know, I'm so conditioned that I've encountered them occasionally and I can't really use them.
Oh, really?
I'm functionally right-handed when it comes to certain things, especially my teeth as well,
Yeah, we gave some permission.
which is funny because it's not like toothbrushes are handed.
Yeah. But you know, some stirring spoons and things are, and they had lots of things like that that you wouldn't, for a right-hand person, you don't realize that they're handed,
Right.
but they are.
Oh. Well, I think, I haven't thought about it much, but you will observe today, I believe that I'm fairly ambidextrous when it comes to stirring.
Mhm.
Okay, so as you can see, I'm just sort of hand shredding the whole mushroom. And that means there will be long bits of mushroom in the soup. And I'm gonna roughly, now that I've shredded them, I'm gonna just very roughly chop them so that there isn't any really long piece of mushroom, because I don't like it when the bite of soup doesn't fit on the spoon. So
Have your
Um,
kids tried this soup? Will they eat it? Or is it
I
too weird?
have not made, if they won't eat it, it's not because they won't eat it, it's because I haven't made it for them. Because, you know, there's certain finer ingredients that I'm reluctant to like try to offer to a 2-year-old. To get started, and I wouldn't actually usually use a cooking oil spray, but it's the one ingredient I forgot to bring to the synagogue. And that's all that the synagogue had here. I would use, you know, a good quality oil. And all of these
Mm.
things go into the pot over a medium heat. And there's I'm going to bring the camera to show how full this pot is. So this is an 8-quart pot that is now about
Everything in the pot.
half full of onions. But not uncooked down.
It is.
And if I were making this dish, say, to feed a group of company the size that in normal times I would like to host on Shabbat, I'd probably double or 1.5 times the recipe. And if I were making this dish for Shabbat, I would just barely cook it, and then I would move it to a crock pot to sit on warm, possibly overnight. So we're gonna let those onions just do an initial stir. And in the meantime, it's totally fine to use dried thyme. That's probably what the original recipe calls for. But I have a very robust herb spiral that my husband planted in our front yard that keeps us in thyme and oregano and parsley and rosemary and lavender all year. So fresh thyme it is. Which of course means that I'm going to need a little more than the teaspoon the recipe calls for, because you always need more quantity of fresh herb than the dry. Get done. I just want to, this is a very dirty soup in the sense that like it's going to have like some sticks of the thyme in it. It's going to have the dirt on the chanterelles in it. It's a little bit of a mess, and I think that's okay. I bless you that if you should ever make this soup, you do it on a stovetop that you're already familiar with. Okay. So what's going to go in now is a teaspoon of mustard seed. I happen to have brown, but yellow would be fine. We'll get those popping. And in another minute, we'll let those onions cook down for another minute. Nope, we will add the salt and let them sweat a little as well. Looks like Nina is trying to get back in.
down.
This is a salty soup because it has the salt and the soy sauce. So if you want to cut some of that, if you don't like salty food, you may want to cut some of that. Now that the onions are getting a little sweaty, we will add the chanterelles and the thyme. Computer closer so you can pull that closer. Well, I'm trying to go slowly so I don't make the mistake. And I'm gonna try.
Left-handed stirring.
I'm gonna try to integrate the chanterelles in with the onions, but not have them fall to the very bottom, because I don't want them to brown and haven't added any liquid yet. The onions will start releasing their own liquid and getting soupy in another moment or two. As you can see, they are already somewhat down from how they were just 7 minutes ago. But now we will give them 3 minutes without bothering them. And measure out the lentils. Over to the right. Go. So Nina told me that you were going to try making this with red lentils, which from a birthright soup perspective is probably the appropriate thing to do, given that when Esau came in and saw Jacob cooking, he said, "Give me some of that red stuff." So either it was a red lentil soup or it was a soup that had some sort of red ingredient. But given that this far precedes the New World crops of tomatoes and peppers making it to the Middle East, I'm not sure what the red ingredient would be.
Beets.
I don't know how this particular soup though will come out with red lentils. Nina has said, you'll tell us, right? It will be ready sooner. They cook faster. than these do. And I've cooked with these, I'm cooking with French green lentils today. I've cooked this with regular green lentils. I've cooked them with nice brown lentils before. Any of them work. They'll all be fine. If you're not getting, if I haven't been explicit enough, it's a very forgiving soup. You can do it with different proportions as well. I think in the recipe I said, you know, up to 1 pound of nice mushrooms. It can be less, it can be more. It can be less, it can be more. Lentils, although I think I would say the 2 cups of lentils is probably the maximum to this ratio of onion that one can do without it completely overpowering the onion flavor, without the lentil completely overpowering the onion in that scheme. So, in fact, yeah, this is 2 keep-in cups, and I don't want quite that much. I like it. So let's see how these onions are doing. Oh, they're cooked down more. And the thing that I was really waiting to see and hear is that there is now a good deal of liquid in the bottom of the pans. The onions are fully sweating and bubbling. And we'll give them a little more liquid to stew in. First, some flavoring. I'm using about a 1/4 cup of, this is Sanjay Tamari. If you have another go-to brand of soy sauce or something like soy sauce that you like to use, that's probably fine as well. This is not a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar because my container of it leaked on the way over. So I will need to add more apple cider vinegar when I take this home a little later. Oh, we have some apple cider vinegar. Okay, I'll fresh the apple cider vinegar. It might be in the pantry next to the fridge. And we can, I'm not going to steal apple cider vinegar from our food pantry. So we'll mix that together. Although I will say, actually, you don't, for the ferment in this soup, it doesn't have to be apple cider vinegar. I think actually a more faithful French onion soup recipe would call for something like sherry or white wine vinegar. And I just use apple cider vinegar because we tend to have that around more, and it's good. Now that I have all my flavors in and the onions are cooking down, I'm going to add my lentils. I'll stir them in to get them sort of coated in the flavor before I add any liquid. I'm going to put about 5 cups of water in. You could put more if you wanted more soup and less stew in the end. it's 5 cups. By the time the lentil gets down, this will be a I don't know, maybe it is kind of red. Maybe it's red enough that this is what Esau wanted to part with his birthright for. We'll crank up the heat on this. Is that 4 cups of water or 5? That was 5 because I filled this Pyrex jar. I didn't just take it to the 2 cups. So we are cranking up the heat on this to bring it back to a boil. And when it boils, we'll then turn it down to a simmer and simmer it for a long time, like an hour and a half. Although an alternative thing I said earlier you could do, and I have done when I'm preparing this, say on Friday, and want to serve it for Shabbat lunch and I don't cook on Shabbat, is as soon as it boils, I put it into a crock pot with a little extra water and just let it keep cooking on low overnight. This is one of those great soups that the flavors just thicken as you go. It will very much reduce though if you do that. So just all of it, you might want to start with a slightly larger recipe than you believe you could possibly need if you want to cook it overnight. Having never led a cooking demo before, I'm not sure if this is the point at which we should say that's all done, because the ingredients are all in, and now it's just a matter of waiting for it to come to a boil, turning it down to a simmer, and then waiting for it to be done.
I think this is where your assistant brings it.
Right, so I'm sorry that I don't have a complete pot of soup to like show you me tasting it, say, delicious. I'd sell my birthright for that. I will say that the fanciest and most delicious way of serving this soup is if you either have some very crusty artisanal bread or some leftover bread that you chop up and toast the heck out of into croutons, and you sprinkle that over the top of the soup right before you eat it, and you do a grating of fresh Parmesan over all of that. It is really divine, but it will be good without those as well. It's one of those great soups that can, if you do the crusty bread and the Parmesan in a big bowl, like this can be a really full meal, or it can, if you add a little more water and don't have it quite so stewy and you keep it soupy, it can be a nice first course soup of a more banquet style meal. So I hope you enjoy experimenting with it. I hope you let me know how it goes if you experiment with it. And if there's any questions about it, I'm happy to hear.
Yeah, Ruhi, I was just wondering, were they growing onions in the ancient days, like in the Middle East?
They were definitely growing alliums. And we know this, this could be another eating the parsha thing, because later in Numbers, one of the many times that the Israelites rebel and God gets mad at them, they say, we miss the melons and the leeks in Egypt. So eating alliums of various sorts, is something that has been done all over the world for thousands and thousands of years, including recorded in Torah. So, specifically onions, they probably weren't eating Walla Walla sweets. Definitely weren't eating Walla Walla sweets or Vidalia onions in ancient Israel or in ancient Egypt, but they definitely were eating some form of bulbing allium.
Great.
Yeah.
Has anyone tried to grow lentils here? Is that something we can grow here?
Here in Eugene?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I haven't heard of it or seen anything about it, but just David's question made me think of it.
Well, it does make sense that they should be growable here because our climate is very similar to the climate of the mountainous regions of the land of Israel. So if they were able to grow onions in able to grow lentils in ancient Israel, we should be able to grow lentils here now.
Yeah. We'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I would, I'd probably see where like Hummingbird Wholesale
Yeah.
sources their lentils from, because they usually source local when they can.
Thanks.
Oh, let's see if I hear a little rattling. This might have come to a boil. Oh, yeah. Very powerful stirring.
It smells really good through the computer.
Jody, do you want to test how it smells here? It smells incredible. Better than what you're smelling through the computer, David.
Okay. Yeah, there's like aroma coming out of my computer. I don't really know why, but there is.
That'll be
Drama.
technology. You can smell through your computer. Oh, yes. Yeah, that sounds great.
Thank you, Ruhi. I'm going to sign off. Goodbye, everybody.
I am
you
too.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Oh,
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Hi.
Okay. Thank you so much. Hey, Jody. Bye-bye.
hey, bye.
It was great. Yeah. Ready for soup.
All right.
Like I know. Got it. Okay, bye-bye.
My soup's a little bit experimental.
All
I did
right.
it with red lentils.
Okay, bye, Ruhi.
Carmina, let us know how it goes. It won't need to cook as long.
I know, that's what I was thinking. So maybe my cook time will be like closer to 45 minutes. I don't know, but it does smell very good.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks.